More breaking news. The High Court has set aside a top young rugby player's discharge without conviction for brutally assaulting two women and two men on a Wellington street. Today's ruling grants the police more time to appeal against Losi Filipo's discharge. Phil Pennington is with us. Phil, thank you for joining us. You've read the ruling at high speed. What can you tell us about it?
Yeah, well, good evening, John. Yes, this was a high-profile case, and the Crown had argued in the High Court this week that Filipo, a former Wellington rep player, should have been jailed for 3 to 3.5 years. Instead, he was discharged without conviction, as we've said. That was after his lawyer successfully argued in court that a conviction would damage his rugby career. His lawyer also told the High Court that the District Court had the full possession of the facts at the time that they made this ruling.
Okay, so what is the High Court saying about the ruling?
The gravity of the assault, John, that's what's key here. Justice David Collins, he says that this was an assault that could have killed one of the men who, Filipo, he stomped on the head of that man, although he was already unconscious. The High Court judge criticises the District Court Judge Davidson that is, saying that it appears that he understated the seriousness of this assault. He says that Judge Davidson did not refer to the stomping on the head 4 times. And the Justice says he's especially concerned that the attack seemed to be unprovoked. There are serious consequences for the other 3 victims, 2 of whom were women. And so it's the seriousness and the gravity of that assault that's really at the key in the heart of this ruling today.
Okay, so that's what the High Court has said, which means what, Phil? What happens now?
Well, he also addressed the fact of the argument that this would damage the young man's rugby career. He says that Judge Davidson, this is Justice Collins, says that Judge Davidson had overstated the impact on the rugby career. He said that evidence fell short of demonstrating that there was a real risk that Filipo would not be able to play professional rugby if he was convicted. The Justice says it's impossible to predict if a young player will in fact go on to become a professional player. And Justice Collins says that the mitigating factors that were taken into account in the original setting aside of the discharge without conviction, the fact that he was still at school, he was only 17 at the time, that he had no previous convictions, and that he had showed remorse, that these should not have meant that he was discharged without conviction.
Phil, what's really interesting, and I may have this wrong, is that Filipo pleaded guilty, right, in the first instance in the District Court, having been given a sentence indication. If that sentence indication no longer stands, and I'm sorry to throw this into your court if the judge hasn't ruled on this or you don't know the answer to it, forgive me in advance, but if that sentence indication doesn't stand, does the plea stand? Can Filipo undo his plea? What happens?
No, we do have an answer to that, John, in the ruling today. Normally, the ruling says the High Court would substitute the decision of the District Court with the decision the High Court thinks is right. However, in this case, because Filipo pleaded guilty after being given that sentence indication that he would be discharged, he now actually gets the opportunity to change his plea from guilty to not guilty. Now, if that happens, it goes back to the District Court for trial, and if not, then the sentencing will go ahead, and that will all be decided on November the 2nd.
Fascinating. Phil Pennington joining us, having read the decision that's just come out from the High Court this afternoon. Thanks so much, Phil. It's coming up to 29, in fact it is 29 minutes to 6. One of Losi Filipo's assault victims, we should say alleged now I guess, welcomes today's decision by a High Court judge to overturn his discharge without conviction. Greg Morgan says he and others will watch keenly the legal process play out, although as Phil just said, given the original guilty plea was entered on a sentence indication of no conviction, that may now be withdrawn. The Crown told the High Court that the former Wellington rep player should have been jailed for 3 to 3.5 years. Justice David Collins has ruled the evidence fell short of demonstrating there was a real risk that Filipo would not be able to play professional rugby if he was convicted. So, one of the victims saying, we're keen to see how this plays out now. That is the latest on that.